So it's time I share with you something that I have been working on for quite some time. It's my vintage Rolex watch collection. So the first watch I want to show you is my 16710 1999 Coke. Now this is kind of like in the gray area there. It's kind of like neo-vintage, not completely vintage yet, but it's nevertheless a very special watch to me because this was actually the first Rolex I ever owned right here. It was given to me by my father in right around 1999. When we went on a hunting trip together, he actually gave it to me 2 days before. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Watch Eric got a brand spanking new Rolex in 1999 of that year. But believe it or not, this was very long time ago, before all the watch flipping for a profit and all that. He actually bought it from a guy that needed the money, had bought it earlier that year, and he paid $1,500. How crazy is that? Next we have my Pepsi 16710 2006. Now obviously this is not vintage, but I kind of just wanted to have the whole row in the bottom with GMTs. So technically I ended up buying this watch because I wanted a Pepsi really bad that was obviously not a modern one. Okay, so this was the first one that I got before I acquired all these other ones. I kind of wanted it to be the sibling of my original Coke. I bought this watch at a very cheap price because at that time that was the market. I bought it about 6 years ago. But it's a very nice watch still to this day. The condition is perfect and I love it. And maybe soon I'll be able to replace it with something that is actually vintage. So the next one I want to show you is actually my real first vintage watch. This is a 1675 and it's actually a 1967. I got this watch on a deal that I did where I sold a Patek and I took this as partial trade. The guy that had it obviously just really didn't enjoy this watch, but the second that I saw it, I mean, look at that bezel, and the dial is flawless. One of the interesting things about this watch that I liked as well is that in the back, somebody engraved the watch in February of 1970 and gave it as a gift to somebody. I kept that like that because I kind of felt like it was cool. But a side note to this watch is that one time I did a video on the white gold ceramic GMT Pepsis and had featured my 1967 Chevelle in that video. And I said it in that video, if you go back and see it, I said, you know, one day I'd like to buy a vintage Pepsi, maybe perhaps a 1967. And lo and behold, maybe 2 to 3 months later, this fell on my lap. You know, when I ran the date code on the serial number and I saw it was a 1967, I had to do whatever it took to keep it in my collection. And this right here is the one that started it all. I put a little hipster strap because I kind of like these leather straps with suede for these type of watches. And then I found an original Rolex buckle, and I think it goes great. Then from there, really started my whole Pepsi obsession. The next Pepsi is a 1980 1675. This is a nice watch. It's got some nice patina on the dial. The insert was obviously replaced, but the watch looks cool. It came in, I saw it. You know, sometimes when I buy these type of watches, it's just because they kind of talk to me. I don't know, they kind of charm me in a way. And I feel like I want it. And then I think about them all there together. So this particular watch has a nice condition. I mean, I think the case could be a little bit better. But overall, I figured, you know, these watches have been coming by my desk less and less. So the last Pepsi I'm gonna show you is my birth year 1982 Pepsi on a Jubilee bracelet. I mean, for me, yes, I like the Jubilee bracelet on the new current ceramic models, but for me, this is the nostalgia that I like. I like them on these old watches, including the yellow gold with the root beer. I think that that is that original look that I love. This particular watch fell across my lap as well. I was doing a deal for a couple watches, a big package, and in there was this piece. When I ran the serial number, 1982. I'm not one of those guys that actually has been out there looking for a 1982, but when I saw it, I said, look at that. Look how charming this watch is. One of the things I love about these type of watches is the character that it has. It just looks so much different than what I usually deal with on a daily basis. Nowadays, I mostly deal with modern watches, a lot of the high-end stuff. So when you see something like this, it just kind of calls my attention, and it's just something special. You know, I put it on my wrist, I wear it for a couple days, and it just gives me a completely different feel than maybe perhaps this Saru GMT. I like that, just something totally different. Plus, of course, it's cool that it's your birth year. Now let's get into the Submariners. The first one that I'm going to show you is actually a 16800 1982 birth year sub. This particular watch, it's interesting how I got it. A gentleman walked into the store where I used to work 25 minutes before we closed. It's a usual guy that worked in the area, came in and said, "Hey, I got this old sub that I want to sell. Is this something you're interested in?" I asked the price, he gave me the price. It was pretty reasonable. I looked at the watch and I said, man, that's a pretty good looking patina it has on the dial. And it's always nice to see that brown pearl on top. So at that moment, I really didn't know that much about vintage, and even till today, I'm still not an expert. Most of these watches I consulted with somebody that I know is an expert before pulling the trigger. But when I saw this watch, it just got my attention because it had that yellowy look, you know, patina on the dial. And guess what? When I checked the date code, 1982. The thing is, when I did the deal with him, he told me it had papers, that he would promise me the papers, but we've heard that before. I'm still waiting for the papers and I never got it back. But about 9 months later, he came back to me and said, "Do you still have that Submariner I sold you? Because I want to buy it back." And I said, "Sorry, man, it's not for sale." So before I get into the next subs, I want to say that when I got this watch, it was kind of like my first old school sub. But I always had that eye that I wanted a plastic glass sub. It's just something about those retro looking subs that really got my attention. But I never really found any. I mean, I lost a couple, some slipped right through the cracks. I remember one time a guy came up to me and had a double red SeaDweller. Didn't look in great condition, but it looked completely original. And he wanted $12,000. And at that time, I was kind of like, oh, you know, it seemed like a lot of money to me, and I didn't buy it. But that always stayed in my head. I said, man, I should have just bought the watch. I mean, the condition wasn't stellar at all, but I think it still would have been a good buy. That being said, so the next one I want to show you is a 1680 1980 sub. This is actually the last one that I've recently purchased out of all of these. And again, I guess I just have a soft spot for these flat top plastic glass. It got my attention. Decent condition. I mean, I wish the case was a little bit thicker, but overall what I liked about this watch is that it's something I can wear and kind of like really kind of use, where it's not such a special piece where I gotta be more careful about it. You know, originally when I pulled the trigger on it, I didn't realize that the bezel insert kind of had some corrosion and had made a hole. Someone did a pretty decent fix on it with some epoxy that you can't even tell, and it's still holding the pearl. But long term, I'm probably gonna try to find a nice little ghost insert and put that in this watch. So I wanna jump over next to this guy right here and talk a little bit about this 1665 1979 Great White SeaDweller. So the thing about this watch is that a friend of mine sends me a picture of this watch inside of a Rolex service pouch, the brand new service pouches that came out, which are like 5 pieces, not the old school ones that you open up. And he says, "Are you interested in this watch?" And I thought to myself, man, it looks cool. You know, it's got that bubbly glass. I had never bought before a vintage SeaDweller before, so I kind of was a little bit excited about it. So he shows me the watch with the box. The papers are laid out, service card from Rolex. It still has all the stickers from service at Rolex. And I said, okay, so what's the price? He gives me the price. I consult with a couple people and I realize, well, it's a safe price. I can't lose, you know, it's pretty much something fun to buy. So I went ahead and I said, you know what? I'll take it. Something about the watch just had charm and I kind of liked it. one of the things that I don't like about the watch is that since it's been serviced and it's got all these stupid stickers everywhere, pretty much no one's worn it, it doesn't look like something I'm gonna wear often, or even at all. The thing about it is when I finally received the watch and I got it, the papers were the wrong ones. They were actually papers for a completely different watch, but since I had not read real carefully on the pictures and I got so excited, I bought the watch. He's a friend of mine. He still owes me the papers. He says that he found them, and if you're out there, you know who you are. Send me the papers, man. I bought this watch because I was excited that it was a full, complete set. So once you get into these plastic crystal subs, you kind of obviously want to get a red letter one. That's the one that everybody talks about. They say, I got a red sub, or I got a double red SeaDweller. Those are kind of the watches that you want. So when I saw this particular watch right here, man, what a stunner. It's a 1680 1973 red letter SeaDweller, and the condition is very, very nice. The bezel, it's got a really nice ghost to it, and overall, for me, it's just a red sub. I've wanted one for a very long time. It's that watch that just grabs my attention. And to be quite honest with you, out of this entire lineup, for the exception of my first GMT, that one will always be with me. Bury me with that watch, if anything, That's the only one I'll never get rid of. But this right here is my favorite one out of all of them. Something about it I just love. I love the look of the bezel with the look of the mild patina on the dial. I mean, it's such a stunner. I love this watch, and the condition is stellar. When I got this watch, it didn't have a bracelet, which was kind of a bit of a bummer, but it's not a big deal because it took me quite some time and I was able to get the correct bracelet with the matching stamp on the clasp. So I'm happy with this watch, and this one right here is the one that really puts the biggest smile on my face. Last but not least is gonna be my double red 1665 SeaDweller, and it's actually a 1973. I do weird stuff like that, so for me, I love that it matches my red sub. Well, did I do that on purpose? No, this was actually a coincidence. I had a longtime follower of mine from YouTube and Instagram reach out to me and say, hey Eric, I got this double red SeaDweller that I bought, and I'm not really wearing it. I've had it for 4 or 5 years. It's a stellar watch in stellar condition, but I'm just not using it, and I'd rather trade up to something else. I thought to myself, well, how much you want? We got an idea of the price range where it was kind of fair for both parties. He brought the watch over. When I saw it in person, I said, oh my God, it's a 1973. It's gonna match my red sub, and the conditions are almost equal. As much as this watch is kind of like, not the holy grail, but a really sought after to have a double red SeaDweller, it's pretty amazing that I personally like to wear on my wrist this one better. Something about the glass, the way that it bubbles out on the sub, that for me, I personally just like a whole lot better. So that is the current state of my vintage Rolex watch collection. Yes, there's a lot of doubles there and some watches that are a little bit redundant, but I like them. I like each and every one of them, and all of them have a story. And one thing I also want to say is this took some time to do. It wasn't something I just did in the last couple years. I mean, I've been working at this for easily 6 years. Not counting this one doesn't count, that's way back then. But it's taken a lot of time and a lot of patience. And if you're patient and you put yourself in the right position and you work hard and you sacrifice, you can get something like this. Probably even 10 times what this is. That's also I want to bring up that if you notice, I really didn't talk anything about prices on these watches, on what I paid or what the market is. I mean, nowadays, the way things are going, where everything with watches is just about the prices and what they cost now and what somebody paid and what they gain, it kind of loses the whole fun of the hobby. This collection for me is a hobby. I love these watches. I bought them knowing that if I lose a little bit of money, I'd be fine with it. Not about the financial gains and with this whole pompous vibe that lately everybody has out there. This is real watch collecting. Everybody expresses it differently. Some guys like lower end watches, all sorts of watches. Some guys only deal with the high end watches. I like to deal in mostly with what I like, what kind of gives me that spark inside me when I see the watches. I deal with very high end watches nowadays, and it's crazy because you kind of become desensitized to all these watches and you kind of don't even feel anything anymore. It's kind of like I put on an RM on my wrist and I'm kind of like, I like it, but you know, these little watches for some reason just give me this whole different energy that some of these expensive pieces do not do. And that's something everybody has to remember at home, is that, you know, the watch hobby is not just about money and how much we're gaining, because this market goes up and down. And when the market goes up and it goes down, I'm not gonna be mad about it going down with my watches. I love my watches. So there you have it. That is my vintage Rolex watch collection. Feel free to comment below what you think about the current state of it and what should I add to this collection. And if you like this video, like and share it. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel.